Sometimes the world whispers things you weren't meant to hear. Sometimes it shows you faces frozen in moments that never should have happened. Places that shouldn't exist, except they do. Shadows that move just beyond your sight. Reflections that linger a moment too long. The Eanaj Effect isn't just a podcast. It's a doorway. A corridor where the ordinary bends into the uncanny, where truths twist into something darker, sharper, almost alive. Every story you'll hear is real, or as close to real as the shadows allow. Some leave traces you can't forget. Some leave questions you can't answer. Listen closely. Watch the corners of your room. Notice what usually goes unnoticed. A flicker behind the blinds. A whisper that isn't your own. A shadow that pauses just a moment too long. Once you step inside the Eanaj Effect, the air changes. The walls breathe. The past, the present, and the things that hide between them begin to feel closer than they should. You might think you can leave the same way you came. You might think you're safe. But safety is a story we tell ourselves. The truth is something else entirely. Episode 1, The Couch That Cried. The Eanaj Effect. Some things hold memory, not just the kind you can see in photos or hear in stories, but memory soaked deep into fabric, into wood, into the bones of things that should be ordinary. Memory that presses back against you when you touch it. Memory that leaks. That's how Kelly Sutherland came to believe her couch was crying. It began in the fall of 1993 in Roanoke, Virginia. Kelly had just signed the lease on a modest 2-bedroom apartment. She was 32, newly divorced, trying to piece together a new life with her 7-year-old son, Jacob. There wasn't much money to stretch. She worked days at the hospital cafeteria, nights cleaning offices when she could pick up the shifts. The apartment was bare at first, the kind of emptiness that echoes. She wanted something soft, something that could make the space feel like a home again. That's why she went to the church thrift sale down the street. St. Bernadette's was unloading odds and ends from their basement. Chairs, lamps, old dressers. Nothing about the sale screamed remarkable. Nothing except a beige corduroy couch tucked against a wall, slouched like it had seen better days. One leg wobbled, there was a faint stain under the armrest, and it smelled faintly of mothballs. But it was $20, and it came with free delivery. That was enough. 2 teens from the youth group dropped it off the next afternoon, muttered a quick, "God bless," and left. Jacob didn't like it from the start. He wrinkled his nose, told his mom it smelled weird, like damp fabric and something sour. Kelly figured it was just the mustiness of old upholstery. Nothing a little Febreze couldn't fix. She brushed it off and told him, "We'll get used to it." But the first night, as a storm rattled the windows and rain ticked against the glass, Jacob came out of his bedroom, pale and wide-eyed. He said he heard crying, soft, muffled sobs, coming from the couch. Kelly thought it was just nerves. New apartment, new sounds, thunder rolling through the hills, kids' imaginations blurred dreams and waking life. She tucked him back in, smoothed his hair, switched on his nightlight, told him it was nothing. But the next night, he came again. This time he said the couch wasn't just crying, it was whispering. It had said, "I'm cold," and then it said his name. Kelly lay awake after that. She tried to rationalize it. Jacob must have dreamed it. But when their dog Samson padded into the room the next afternoon and stopped dead in front of the couch, when his fur bristled and he let out a low warning growl, the kind that comes from something primal, she couldn't dismiss it so easily. That night, she heard it too. A thin, ragged sound. Weeping. It carried through the silence like a draft sneaking under the door. Then, just barely louder than her own breath, a whisper. Kelly. She didn't sleep much. She turned the cushions over, crawled beneath with a flashlight, checked for vents or radios, or any explanation that would let her put this back into the realm of the explainable. But the couch gave up nothing. By the end of the week, when she tried fixing the crooked leg, she discovered something that made her hands tremble. The bottom fabric wasn't factory made. It was crudely stitched shut, threads zigzagging in frantic lines, like someone had sealed it in a hurry. With kitchen scissors, she snipped through the seam. The stuffing parted, and inside, bundled tightly, was a pink baby blanket wrapped around a diary. The diary's cover was cracked, the pages yellowed, some ink smeared, some pages stained with marks that looked too much like dried tears. The handwriting was small, tight, pressed hard against the paper as though the writer didn't trust the words to hold unless she forced them down. The name inside? Danielle Sharp, 15 years old. The entries dated from 1987 to 1989, and they read like a girl writing from inside a locked room. Danielle wrote of living at a youth shelter, St. Bernadette's, the very same church where Kelly had found the couch. She'd been placed there after being labeled a troubled teen. But her diary didn't sound troubled. It sounded terrified. She wrote about punishments, about having her shoelaces taken, her door locked, her voice silenced whenever she cried too loudly. She described being shoved into a so-called quiet room, a bare pantry that smelled like mold and ketchup, until she learned to stop asking questions. She wrote about lying on a mat, staring at water stains on the ceiling, pretending to be furniture so people would stop noticing her. One line lodged itself in Kelly's chest and refused to leave. Sometimes I dream I'm the couch. That way they sit on me, but don't see me. Danielle disappeared in July of 1989. Her case went cold. No signs of escape, no signs of struggle. She had simply vanished from the shelter one night, as if the world had swallowed her whole. Kelly went to the police with the diary. An officer came to her apartment, collected it, scribbled some notes, promised to pass it on. But weeks passed, then months, no word. When she finally called the station, they told her no such officer existed. No badge number, no report, nothing on record at all. Kelly returned to the church, desperate for answers. The youth director stiffened when she mentioned Danielle. He muttered that the shelter had closed after some allegations. Wouldn't elaborate, wouldn't meet her eyes. So Kelly searched on her own. At the library, she scrolled through rolls of microfilm, pages of forgotten local news. She found only one tiny article, tucked deep inside the classifieds. Teen girl reported missing from church group shelter. A black and white photo of Danielle stared back at her. Her eyes looked hollow, as if hope had drained from them long before she disappeared. That night, Kelly couldn't rest. The couch seemed colder beneath her, damp, almost. She told herself it was in her head, but the next morning she dragged it outside, propped a handwritten sign against it, "Free, needs repair." By sundown, it was gone. She thought she was done with it. Until a week later, when she opened her front door to find the diary on her doormat. Same blanket wrapped around it, the fabric tighter this time. A note taped to the cover. "She's not finished yet." Kelly tried to burn it. She dropped it into a fire pit and lit a match. But the pages curled without catching, as though the words refused to be consumed. She moved, changed her number, tried to stitch her life back together. But silence has its own way of speaking. Some nights when the world was too still, she'd swear she heard the faintest crying. Not from her apartment, not from any room she could name, but from somewhere deeper. Inside the walls, inside the fabric of her life, like grief that had learned to seep through time. Years passed. In 2005, a contractor renovating what had once been the shelter pried loose a boarded-up pantry. Behind it was a hidden crawl space barely 3 feet wide. Inside lay fragments: a girl's school ID, a few elastic hair ties, a single fingernail, and a strip of corduroy fabric, the same beige corduroy as Kelly's old couch. DNA confirmed it belonged to Danielle Sharp, but there was no body, no charges filed, no closure, just silence layered over silence. Jacob grew up carrying that silence. He tells people he doesn't trust furniture he doesn't know. He won't sit on thrifted couches, won't even lean against a stranger's armchair. He remembers the crying, the way the voice said his name like it knew him, like it needed him to stay small, to stay with it. The couch was never found. When Kelly passed in 2019, the diary was anonymously donated to a museum in Richmond that documents unsolved disappearances. It rests in a locked glass case. Visitors claim the glass fogs without warning, a thin breath from nowhere. Some swear they hear whimpering when they lean too close. One little girl tugged her mother's sleeve and asked, "Why is the girl in the book so sad?" But there was no girl nearby, only the diary, only the memory, only something still waiting to be seen. Some things hold memory, and some memories refuse to loosen their hold. Sometimes it isn't about whether something's haunted, it's about whether it's still waiting to be heard. Episode 2, Last Seen in the Background. The Eanaj Effect. Melissa Carson never thought she would find her sister on YouTube. Not 5 years after Lainey vanished. Not tucked into the corner of a prank video with a title as thoughtless as it was cruel. Guy dumps ice on sleeping homeless lady. But there she was, at exactly 14 seconds in. Faint, almost an afterthought, lost among the chaos of laughter and splashing water. Behind a shopping cart, in the shadows, wearing the same black hoodie she had disappeared in. Pale, gaunt, mouth hanging slightly open, like a word had been caught between her lips and never released. Melissa leaned closer to the screen, breath fogging the glass. She hit pause, then rewind, then play again. Frame by frame, pixel by pixel. The twitch at the corner of her sister's mouth was small, subtle, but unmistakable. Not surprise, not amusement. Fear, pure, frozen fear. That was Lainey. Lainey had gone missing in 2002. She was 15, walking home from the gas station on County Road 6, just outside Greenwood, Mississippi. Early June, humid, cicadas humming in the trees, asphalt baking under the sun. It should have ended with dinner, laughter, ordinary life. Instead, it ended in silence. The search was thorough but fruitless. Neighborhoods canvassed, fields combed, rivers dragged. Weeks, months passed. No witnesses, no suspects, nothing. Eventually, the case went cold. Everyone assumed the worst. Everyone, that is, except Melissa. Finding Lainey frozen in the background of a prank video in 2007 felt like fate itself mocking her. She contacted the uploader, Prank Bro Billy 69. No response. She flagged it, reported it, nothing. It stayed online. She downloaded the video and tore it apart, refusing to blink, refusing to let the pixels lie. And that's when she saw him. A man in the background, detached from the laughter, the chaos, the camera. He was always there. Uniformed as a gas station attendant, name tag Reggie. She saw him again and again. 3 separate videos, different months, different states, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas. Same uniform, same vacant stare. Always near the subject, always watching, never participating, never smiling. Melissa began charting him. Every video she could find. Dates, locations, upload times, screenshots pinned to walls, scribbled over in red ink. Reggie was always there. And sometimes, so was Lainey. Not front and center, Not enough for most to notice, but in reflections of glass doors in the mirrored side of a van, hovering at the edge of the frame like a shadow that shouldn't exist, her expression fixed, hollow, waiting, watching, hoping someone would see her. And it wasn't just Lainey. Melissa noticed patterns. At 14 seconds, 1 minute 21, 3 minutes 33, people moved in precise ways. Fingers tapped, heads tilted, blinks too measured to be chance. Graffiti appeared, shifted between frames as though drawn later. Noise wasn't random, it was language, code, a silent map for someone who knew how to read it. Melissa reached out to Trevor Malik, former FBI analyst, now connected to a trafficking survivors network. She sent him 5 videos. His reply was immediate. These weren't coincidences, they were signals, embedded codes, hiding in plain sight inside viral content. Backgrounds weren't filler, they were maps, instructions, evidence. Victims weren't missing, they were being displayed. Trevor described it as a slow drip of control, a digital breadcrumb trail designed for anyone paying attention. They're showing them, he said over a secure call, and daring someone to notice. Melissa carried her evidence to the police. They laughed, told her she was imagining things, lost in grief, seeing ghosts in pixels. One officer leaned back, smirking. This is YouTube, sweetheart, not Dateline. So she went deeper. She found a mirrored corner of Reddit, a forum called Unblurred Eyes, where people shared sightings, relatives flickering in travel vlogs, Twitch streams, live streams. They told her to watch for a watermark, faint in the lower corner. PB69 Holdings. Not Prank Bro Billy 69. She dug, traced it to a shell company in Panama, connected to over 600 accounts, hundreds of low-effort prank clips, millions of views, and almost every video contained a shadow. Then the message came. No sender, no email, no handle, just text. She's still alive. Look for the laundromat video, south of Itabena. Melissa drove between Greenwood and Itabena. 7 laundromats. Number 5, Spin Fresh Laundry. She froze. Graffiti replicated exactly from one of the videos. Red swirl, chipped tile, scorch mark on a dryer. She asked the owner for security footage, refused. That night, parked outside hoping to catch the next upload. 2:30 in the morning, flames erupted. Building destroyed, ruled accidental. Melissa knew better. Obsessed, she vanished into her pursuit. Lived out of her car, burner phones, library computers, VPNs, metadata analysis. She tracked upload times, IP shadows, server clusters, learned to see what the world scrolled past. Every video felt like a clue, every pixel a breadcrumb. Then a flash drive arrived. Unmarked envelope, no note, sticky tab. She blinked 3 times at 2:48. Melissa played it. No prank, no music, dimly lit room, bare walls, a girl in a chair. Lainey, hoodie loose, eyes wide, unblinking. A man's voice, say cheese, sweetheart. She didn't move, didn't speak. Blinked 3 times at exactly 2:48. Screen cut black, metadata traced to Memphis. Melissa drove there, found a warehouse, empty. Cot in the corner, chain bolted to floor, 2 cameras, 4 Polaroids. None of them Lainey. Proof someone had been there. Someone had moved her. Again, 2 months later, PB69 accounts vanished. Deleted, like they never existed. Around the same time, Melissa disappeared. Last sighting, Baton Rouge Greyhound Station. Laptop bag, worn jacket, looking over her shoulder as though someone else was filming her. Prank videos still circulate, reposted, memeified. Millions of views, people laugh, comment, share. But look closer, past the pranks, past the chaos. You might see them. Those who don't move like extras. Those who blink too slowly, staring into the lens as if it's their only way out. Some say coincidence. Lighting, paranoia. Melissa knew better. Before she vanished, she left a voicemail on a trafficking tip line. Calm, almost resigned. What if the internet isn't watching us? What if it's where they hide us? No one knows where Lainey is, or Melissa, but the line between entertainment and evidence has never been thinner. If you ever see something strange in a background, someone staring too long, blinking too slowly, moving too deliberately, don't scroll past. Don't laugh it off. Look closer, because sometimes the only difference between a glitch and a plea for help is 3 slow blinks. Episode 3, The Babysitter's Loop, The Eanaj Effect. Some stories don't just linger, they bend the world around you. Time becomes pliable, like taffy pulled between fingers you don't remember using. And some places, some houses, refuse to let go of what happened inside them. This is one of those places. It was the summer of 1998 in Lincoln Heights, a quiet suburb just north of downtown Cincinnati. Denise Williams was 17, quiet, observant, the sort of girl who kept detailed logs of every babysitting job she took. The addresses, the families, the children's snack preferences, even the number of times each child asked for water. She collected stickers, loved vintage sweaters, and had an uncanny memory for faces. Friends joked she could catalog the world like a library, but her parents saw it as harmless diligence. That diligence is what led her to 1160 Belgrave Court. Denise described it as a cul-de-sac house tucked behind the woods, 20 minutes from downtown. She told her mother she was babysitting for the Parkers, 2 kids, ages 4 and 6. Her mom packed her a sandwich, 2 juice boxes, and her Walkman, kissed her forehead at 5:42 p.m., and watched her leave, unaware that she would never come back. The 911 call came in that night. It's one of the most haunting pieces of audio anyone has ever heard. Denise's voice was tight, panicked, but oddly calm at the same time. She told the dispatcher the house was wrong, empty, silent, the doors locked behind her, though she hadn't touched them. A television hummed on in a room she couldn't recognize. Dust coated every surface, thick and unbroken. And there was a note, yellowed and curled. "Welcome, Denise." She insisted it looked like it had been there for decades. And then, the photo. She said there was a Polaroid on the wall, a picture of herself in a floral print rocking chair. She had never been there before. And yet there she was, staring out from the wall like she belonged. The call ended abruptly. Static filled the line, followed by a low, unidentifiable hum. Officers arrived, and what they found was impossible. The house had been abandoned since 1979. Neighbors confirmed it. Boarded windows, cobwebs, dust. No electricity, no furniture, no Parkers, no children, nothing, except that Polaroid on the living room end table. Denise in the same rocking chair, dated August 14, 1976. 22 years before she was born. DNA confirmed it was her. Chemical analysis confirmed the photo had developed in the 1970s. No fingerprints, no evidence of tampering. Her Walkman, oddly, was found outside the porch. The tape inside was slightly warped, even though the day had been warm and calm. And when her parents tried to develop her last roll of film, half of the shots depicted a room they did not recognize. The same rocking chair, same furniture, freshly used, clean, lived in. For months, the story seemed untraceable, untouchable. Internet sleuths obsessed over it. Theories spun wild. Underground bunkers, time anomalies, orchestrated abductions. And then Miriam Dean, a local archivist with an eye for anomalies, discovered something chilling. Belgrave Court had been built in 1968. The Parkers had lived at 1160, yes, but in 1976, a fire consumed the house. The family inside died. 2 children, a teenage babysitter. No one survived. Darlene Wallace, also 17, also African American, also a girl described as quiet, meticulous, observant. Vintage sweaters, sticker collection, sound familiar? Denise had not stumbled into a random house. She had walked into the echo of a tragedy, a place that never fully moved forward. Some believe the house folded time back onto itself, looping memory, trauma, and death like a spiral. Denise became a ghost in her own life, a reflection of a girl who had lived and died decades before her. Others whisper of reincarnation. Denise, as Darlene, pulled back to complete something left unfinished, or maybe just to vanish again. Marcus, the boy living in the new condo on Belgrave Court, swears sometimes he hears footsteps in the hallway at night. Quiet, hesitant, deliberate. And sometimes, tucked in the mail slot, he finds Polaroids. All of the same girl, sitting in the rocking chair, 17 forever, watching, waiting. But Denise's story begins not with neighbors or with Polaroids or with history. It begins with that night, the 911 call. The dispatcher's transcript is fragmented, static-laced but haunting. Dispatcher 911, what's your emergency? I'm at 1160 Belgrave. But it's wrong. Something's wrong. The doors, they locked behind me. Locked behind you? Did you see anyone inside? No, except a note. Welcome, Denise. But it looks old, like it's been here for years. And there's a picture. Me on the wall. I've never been here. Ma'am, stay calm. Help is on the way. I don't think I'm supposed to be here. It's like the house. It's remembering me, watching, waiting. Line filled with static, faint hum, call disconnected. No one could explain it. Officers found nothing. No fingerprints. No evidence that Denise had entered the house at all. The Polaroid, however, remained. When Miriam Dean cross-referenced fire department records, old property rolls, and zoning maps, she found more anomalies. Darlene Wallace had been last seen babysitting on that same date in 1976. The rocking chair had survived the fire in a photograph taken after the investigation. And every piece of furniture Denise had photographed on her last roll matched the interior of the house before it burned. Not rebuilt, not renovated, just preserved in memory. Some theories propose time loops or residual energy that preserves trauma, that folds the world back onto itself in strange local pockets. Others speak of reincarnation, cycles of unfinished business, or doors that exist between decades, barely perceptible, through which the wrong people sometimes stumble. For Denise, it was not theory, it was experience. The house had claimed her attention, folded her into the memory of a girl who had been trapped there, repeating a role she had never known existed. She was the babysitter, the observer, the victim, and the witness, trapped in a loop that ignored the logic of years. When Belgrave Court was demolished in 2001, new condos replaced it. The ground was leveled, lawns planted, driveways paved, but the stories linger. Marcus, living there now, hears crying at night, the sobs faint, a girl's voice slipping between walls. Polaroids continue to appear in mail slots, unsigned, untouched, depicting the girl in the rocking chair. Always 17, always waiting. Some insist these are coincidences or pranks or imagination running wild. But ask anyone who has examined the Polaroids closely. Denise's eyes do not say, "Help me." They do not plead. They do not even recognize you. Her gaze says something stranger, something patient, something resigned. I've been here before. Denise Williams may have returned from that night. She may walk among us now. But time in that corner of Cincinnati folds back onto itself. And the house, long gone, still loops. Children who never grew up, walls that never changed, a babysitter who keeps watching, who keeps waiting, trapped between decades, playing a game whose rules no one alive can understand. And when you see an old photograph tucked into an album, a frame dated decades before your birth, look closely. Look into her eyes. Because sometimes when you blink, time blinks with you. And sometimes it never blinks at all. Episode 4, Room for One More. The Eanaj Effect. Some people walk into your life like echoes. You don't notice them at first. Just a flicker at the edge of your vision. A quiet imprint in a room that should feel empty. You don't meet them, you remember them. And sometimes that memory isn't yours. This story begins in Baltimore, 1984. A psych ward in a hospital rebuilt after a fire. A quiet patient. And a nurse named Mary Delane, who should have never opened the door marked room 12. Mary was new to the floor, young, earnest, carrying notebooks of schedules, charts, and procedures like armor against chaos. That night, she was instructed to make room. There were too many patients, too few beds. The director's words echoed, "Make space anyway." So Mary moved the wheelchair into a corner of room 12. A room no nurse had wanted to touch since the fire 4 years earlier. A nurse had died in that blaze, trying to pull patients to safety. The wings were rebuilt, yet room 12 was always avoided. The floor staff whispered about drafts that didn't make sense, whispers that weren't human, chairs that rocked when no one was near. The patient had no name, no identification, no history, just a chart, adult female. Nonverbal, monitored only, possible PTSD, no current meds. The staff gave her no room number. They wheeled her into the corner, the shadows embracing her like they had been waiting. Mary studied her. The woman never blinked at the flickering TV. She never turned when nurses passed. She ate only when fed, moved only when guided, never volunteered a glance or a sound. And yet Mary felt drawn to her. Something in that silent presence gnawed at the edges of memory, like a puzzle missing its last piece. She called her Grace. Because even without eyes or words, the woman seemed to carry the weight of survival. "You've been through fire and didn't flinch," Mary whispered one night. "You walked out and survived." Grace didn't respond, but she began to haunt Mary's dreams. The first dream was vivid. Mary stood barefoot in a smoke-choked hallway. The uniform on her back wasn't hers, yet the name tag said, "Grace." Screaming voices curled through the smoke, flames licked the door frames, and Mary realized she was holding it shut, keeping someone safe. A young nurse crouched beneath a desk, terrified, waiting. Mary woke screaming, her sheets damp, the smell of smoke in her hair. The dreams persisted. Each night, the scenes repeated, like a film running on loop. Mary saw Grace refusing to leave the fire. She wrapped the young trainee in a blanket, guided her toward the emergency exit, and stayed behind herself. The flames swallowed Grace's body, yet Mary could feel it, her presence lingering in the hallway, in the corners of room 12, in the sheets of her bed. Awake, Mary became obsessed. She requested archived hospital files, fire reports, personnel records from 1980 to 1984. Microfilm, yellowed documents, old photographs. Everything pointed to a nurse named Grace Holloway. She died in the fire, age 33. Heroic. The reports praised her bravery. The survivor? Only one, a 19-year-old trainee named Mary Delane. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was living Grace's memory. She was the survivor. She was Grace. Or maybe Grace had returned as her. Mary ran to room 12 one night, drawn by an urgency she couldn't explain. Grace was awake for the first time, fully awake. Her eyes, dull, distant, focused on nothing and everything. And then the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic. Quiet, but endless. Mary watched, unflinching, as Grace cried. Not just as herself, not just as someone else, but as a reflection, a past self grieving a present one. Nightmares and reality began to blur. One dream placed Mary beneath the desk, unconscious, while Grace guided her out. Another had her wandering the smoke-filled halls, the name tags swapped. Each iteration whispered, "You weren't supposed to come back alone." Mary woke to silence. Room 12's corner bed had vanished. The chart for the silent patient was gone. Head nurses denied knowledge. "Who?" they asked. She described Grace, described the file, pulled the number, blank. Nothing existed, except the echo of that corner, that space, that room. Mary began noticing other things. The lights in the hallway flickered in patterns. A chair rocked by itself. Cold spots lingered in the corners. Shadows darted just beyond sight. And the patient, the woman who was no one, who had no history, sometimes seemed to look straight at her. Not at Mary, but through her. Watching her. Waiting. Mary began documenting everything. Logs of room occupancy, bed assignments, security footage anomalies, nurses whispering about the girl in room 12, about staff seeing a familiar woman pass down the hall who didn't exist in the records. She compared notes with former employees, cross-referenced fire reports with personnel schedules, looked for every mention of Grace Holloway, every patient, every incident. She pieced together something horrifying. Room 12 never truly had an occupant die. The fire had consumed bodies, yes, but some essence, some memory lingered, trapped in that corner. The wing rebuilt, the beds reset, but the room never emptied. Grace's presence had folded time back onto itself. The present had folded over the past until Mary herself became part of the cycle. Visitors reported seeing her, or Grace. Nobody agreed. Patient? Nurse? Both? Eyes following them down the hall, silent cries caught in the corners of their ears. An empty chair rocking. A hallway that smelled faintly of smoke, even in 1984. And always, the sense that the room had space for one more. Mary began seeing her own reflection in other nurses' eyes. Mirrors in the nurses' lounge would hold a ghostly figure behind her. Security cameras captured fleeting glimpses of someone she didn't recognize. But when she paused the footage frame by frame, it was herself. Standing there, watching, waiting. The loop deepened. Her dreams became maps. Smoke, walls, bodies. Each night a maze she had to navigate. Each morning she carried fragments of that maze into the waking world. Every corner of room 12 felt like a landmark. Every shadow a guide. And she knew, with a certainty that terrified her, that she was not alone in the timeline. Not with Grace. Not with herself. Time was folding, spiraling, layering. Mary Delane and Grace Holloway were not two separate women. They were echoes, reflections, continuations of a single act, a single sacrifice. Room 12 was both past and present, the smoke and the silence, the hero and the survivor. When she walked the halls during the day, nurses noticed her absent-minded glances toward that corner, her murmured apologies when no one was there. She began labeling charts with notes only she understood. Observed shadow, 3:17 a.m. Whisper heard, no origin. Patient watched bed unresponsive, but the records never corroborated her observations. In the official logs, room 12 was empty. In her own memory, it was crowded with histories, presences, past lives folded neatly into corners. Mary began to accept it. The room had space for one more. Yes, but not for a visitor. Not for someone who expected closure, who expected endings. The room existed outside normal sequences. Within its walls, grief, heroism, and memory repeated indefinitely. It was a stage, a mirror, a corridor of eternity where the echoes of what was never finished played endlessly. Even now, decades later, nurses speak quietly of room 12. Renovations have tried to erase it, repainting the walls, replacing the floor tiles, installing new beds, but the room refuses to empty. Staff report fleeting shadows, temperature drops, and the faint smell of smoke when no fire exists. Some swear they've seen a woman in a nurse's uniform, a patient gown, sometimes both, standing in the corner, watching, waiting. Mary's fate? No one knows. Some say she eventually merged completely with Grace, a single entity looping through memory and duty. Others claim she vanished, swallowed into the room, leaving behind nothing but fragmented records and whispered warnings. Room 12 continues to exist, not on maps, not in charts, but in perception. For those who enter, it is impossible to forget. The walls contain more than concrete. They hold echoes of sacrifice, remnants of memory, shadows of lives folded over each other. And every now and then, those echoes reach out, searching for the one who hasn't yet joined them. Sometimes trauma doesn't end. Sometimes it simply waits, folds back, changes faces, moves timelines, and waits for memory to catch up. In Baltimore, the hospital still stands. Room 12 has been remodeled, yes, but some nurses will never stay long. They know what lingers. They know there is always room for one more. So if you ever find yourself wandering hospital corridors late at night and you feel a presence at your back, or smell smoke that isn't there, or glimpse a woman in a uniform that seems familiar, you're not alone. Sometimes what we forget comes looking. Sometimes it waits for us to remember. This has been the Eanaj Effect, where memory is messy, timelines fold, and identity is never quite settled. Room 12 still waits, and it may have space for you. Episode 5, Don't Read Her Name Out Loud, the Eanaj Effect. There's a reason some names in silence, a reason some stories go untold, buried beneath bureaucracy, tucked into dusty folders, or sealed behind eyes that learn not to speak. Some names carry weight, histories, and consequences that linger long after the pages are closed. And sometimes just saying a name aloud can awaken something you were never meant to see, or worse, erase someone else. This is the Eanaj Effect. Jennifer wasn't looking for anything. Not really. It was just a Thursday, one of those Rhode Island afternoons that couldn't decide if it was thawing into spring or pretending. The sky was a dull, mottled gray, the kind of color that makes the shadows seem sharper, more deliberate. The wind carried the faint tang of salt from Narragansett Bay, twisting through cracked sidewalks and crooked street signs, catching in the low branches of trees that hadn't fully shed their winter dead. She wandered into Gracie's Thrift and Vintage, the kind of store that seemed to have been here forever, smelling of perfume spilled decades ago and paper yellowed with age. Dust motes danced in the thin shafts of sunlight through lace curtains. The wind chimes that hung in the front window jingled quietly as if they remembered better days. Gracie's was the kind of place where the past lingered, but not in a comforting way. It was the kind of place where you could almost hear the people who weren't there anymore. Jennifer wasn't looking for ghosts. Not really. She was looking for a basket, for her keys, maybe for herself. Instead, she found a leather-bound journal wedged between outdated cookbooks and crayon-smeared coloring books. The cover was worn and scuffed, the corners bent, no title, no lock, just a faded sticky note. Free, do not return. She turned it over in her hands. The leather was soft, almost greasy, as if it had been handled by many hands over many years. There was a faint, almost imperceptible smell. Paper, ink, something metallic, almost coppery, like blood left to dry in sunlight. Jennifer slid it out carefully, her fingers brushing the edges of pages that felt brittle and heavy. The pages inside seemed older than the building, yellowed, warped from moisture, thumbed through by fingers that left behind secrets. Each page had the same 3 entries, a name, a date, and every few pages, a warning scribbled in smeared red ink. Don't say them out loud. Jennifer was curious, not superstitious. She brought it home and sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone lukewarm. She filmed a TikTok, calling it the Rhode Island Death Note. She read some names aloud, half laughing, half daring the universe to respond. Nothing happened. Nothing until she reached the fourth name, Maya Elise Benton. April 12, 2007. Her phone pinged immediately. A comment from a user named at ShellyRose75. That's my cousin's name, but she died in 2008. Then wait, I never told anyone that. And then silence. Shelly's profile vanished. No account, no trace, not even cached, just gone. Jennifer shrugged. Troll, glitch, internet weirdness. But over the next few days, 3 more users who had commented on that name disappeared too. Not banned, not blocked, simply scrubbed from existence. No posts, no pictures, no digital echo left behind. Jennifer began noticing shadows she hadn't before. A gray sedan parked outside her apartment intermittently, just enough to be noticed. A sense of eyes in the windows, always watching, never blinking. A faint metallic smell lingering in the kitchen, like ink and rust and something else she couldn't name. She started keeping the journal on her lap at night, hugging it like a child. She didn't read aloud anymore. Not yet. She didn't want to know what would happen next, but sometimes she thought she heard it whispering to her anyway. One of her friends, noticing her jitteriness, sent a message. That journal wasn't lost. It was left behind, for a reason. Jennifer ignored the warning. Curiosity outweighed caution. She brought the journal to the Providence Public Library, claiming it was for a research project. An elderly librarian, Mr. Easley, helped her search archives, old police blotters, and missing persons reports. Each name she read aloud corresponded to a girl under 18, reported missing between 1996 and 2008, all closed as runaways. No investigations, no press, no one looking. Jennifer's hands shook as she traced lines of faded ink. Each name felt heavier than the last. A timeline emerged, mapping foster transfers, emergency placements, girls who disappeared into silence. She noticed patterns others might have missed. Certain towns repeated, names that sounded similar, dates that coincided with holidays, birthdays, even days when the moon was new or full. Every red warning in the journal whispered in her mind, don't say the names, not unless you want to know what happens next. She stayed up nights reading. Some names she didn't speak aloud, others she dared to whisper, thinking it couldn't hurt anyone. But it did. She started noticing things she couldn't explain. The shadows that lingered longer than they should. The feeling of someone brushing past her in the library when she was alone. Small, untraceable noises. A whisper of paper turning, a cough behind a shelf. Then came the letter. No return address. Inside was a screenshot of her live stream, frozen at the exact moment she had said Maya Elise Benton. Beneath it, one sentence, you can't say what you can't forget. The next day, she tried to leave the journal on a bench outside a police station. When she returned to her apartment that evening, it was there, wrapped in plastic. A new name had been added, hers, and the date was tomorrow. Jennifer left the state. She wiped her social media clean, changed numbers, moved multiple times, but the journal resurfaced wherever she went, once in Warwick, once in Newport. Each time, it disappeared again before anyone could trace the donation. Each time, the names multiplied. Each time, it felt heavier. She began sleeping with the lights on, never more than one window open. She checked under her bed, inside closets, behind doors. She carried her phone like a lifeline, watching for shadows, for reflections, for anything that wasn't hers, but moving as if it were. She heard footsteps when no one was there, whispers she couldn't quite catch. Sometimes the journal would slide across the table while she was reading, just slightly, as if nudged by some invisible hand. Jennifer never spoke of it. Not aloud, not to friends, not to the authorities. The only thing she admitted to herself was that some names were never meant to be lost, and others were never meant to be found. Some evenings, when the sky was low and gray, she would hear the faint sound of someone whispering in her apartment. Not her voice, not a voice she recognized, but a voice that knew the names, knew the dates, knew the pattern. And she could feel them waiting, always waiting, in the spaces where the ink hadn't yet dried, where the pages hadn't yet been turned. And she began to notice the pattern herself. The journal was meticulous. It didn't just list names, it tracked movement, small details in life, odd coincidences. She realized someone had mapped the girls' last known locations, traced the paths of their foster care placements, and noted which houses had cameras, which streets had shadows, and which names were already marked as spoken. Every name she read aloud changed something in the network of silence she could feel pulsing behind the pages. Jennifer understood the risk. Every time she read a name aloud, she could feel it reach beyond her room. She imagined those names as fragile glass, each one balancing on a needlepoint. Say it wrong, and it would shatter. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of them, waiting unseen, watching, listening, waiting for someone to forget. The final night she kept the journal, she wrote everything down, every name she hadn't spoken, every date she had recorded. She numbered the pages, penciled in small annotations, a town, a street corner, a date, a warning she had added herself. The journal responded, not in words, not in pages, but in the subtle feeling of pressure, a weight pressing from her lap into her thighs as if it were breathing, as if it were aware she knew too much. Then she heard it, a soft, insistent tapping on her window, not loud, not demanding, just steady. Tap, tap, tap. She held her breath. The journal slid off the table and fell open to a page she didn't remember writing. A name, a date, and hers. Jennifer left that night. She didn't look back. She never returned. And she never spoke the name aloud again. The journal, as always, eventually resurfaced. Once in Warwick, once in Newport. And each time, it brought more names, more dates, more lives hovering on the edge of memory and oblivion. Sometimes, people claim to have glimpsed it in thrift stores, forgotten attics, or the back shelves of libraries. And those who try to read it aloud, well, there are fewer of them every year. If you ever stumble across a journal with torn pages and red ink, don't read the names. Not on live stream, not in your bedroom, not even in a whisper. Every time a name leaves the page, it calls someone to notice, to respond, to vanish in its place. Some truths are better left whispered, some names are safer forgotten, and sometimes the silence itself is the only protection.
Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. Don't forget to subscribe and keep the cases coming. Your support keeps this channel alive and helps uncover the stories that need to be told. Until next time, stay dangerously safe.